Welcome to Something to Say, where we bring voices from diverse backgrounds who will share their unique stories and perspectives on finding their passion and provide insights on how you can find yours. Join us as host Greg DeShields guides us through this enlightening journey.
Welcome to Something to Say podcast, a unique platform that amplifies the voices of individuals from various backgrounds, sharing their passion. I'm your host, Greg DeShields, and I'm pleased to bring you another episode. Thank you for joining us. As your host, I am pleased to welcome Ernest Owens, an award-winning journalist. Ernest is not just an award-winning journalist, but is also the CEO of his own media empire. Additionally, he is the president of the Philadelphia Association of Black Journalists, a political writer at large for Philadelphia Magazine, and regional vice president of the National Academy of Television and Arts and Sciences Mid-Atlantic chapter. He is a proud lifetime member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity, Inc. He is the executive producer and host of the hit podcast, Earnestly Speaking, which, by the way, I have to get on that, and host of Philadelphia City Council live on Word Radio. He is the author of the book, The Case for Cancel Culture, published by St. Martin's Press and imprint of Macmillan Publishers. As an openly gay journalist, he has made headlines for speaking frankly about intersectionality issues on society regarding race, LGBTQIA, and pop culture. In 2018, he launched his growing media company, which specializes in multimedia production, consulting, and communications. And we are thrilled to have him join us on Something to Say. Welcome, Ernest. So, Ernest, thank you so much for joining us today. I am really anxious to interview you because, needless to say, there is so much activity that you've been involved with. I mean, it is the end of the year, so there's a lot of celebrations and things like that. But there's been so much underway. I'm just excited to talk to you about this conversation of journalism. So, thank you for being a part of today's podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
So you are truly a busy person. I mean, you're constantly networking. You are engaged with a variety of different leaders, helping to put things into perspective. We really appreciate for you doing that. But you are also someone who is a very intense writer. And all of that, I think people know and they see, but just really, who are you? So, in order for our audience to get to know you a little bit better than what they see throughout the course of the day, the month, the week, the year, we have something to say, have a series of get to know you questions. And we'd like to first move our way through those get to know you questions so our audience gets to know you a little bit more and get a bit of a better perspective about you. So, are you up for it? We'll ask you a few of those and then we'll dive into some of the more heavy hitting questions.
Let's do it.
All right, so let's make something very interesting to start with. What is your favorite childhood memory?
Probably when I was in eighth grade, I had one student of the year at my middle school. It's Albright Middle School in Houston, Texas. And my whole family was there. And I was nominated amongst some other students. And I didn't think I was going to win. I did not think I was going to win. And it was a bunch of us all. It was like the way they did like a Miss America pageant where they had it where it was like about 4 or 5 of us, and we were like the finalists, and we was up on the stage, and we're in a huge, my middle school was huge, like hundreds of people. We were in a huge like gym, and it was like everyone's parents and everything. And so they're going one by one, and it's down to me and this other guy who I was really good friends with actually. And if he would have won, I would have been so happy for him. And I think we were right next to each other. And I think he was like telling me, like, oh, you're gonna win. I was like, no, you're clearly gonna win. And they named me, and the whole crowd like goes crazy. And I just remember my mom was like on the front row, and she runs up and she's hugging me, and my siblings are there, and it's a huge. It was just so exciting, and that was something unexpected. And yeah, that felt good. I think about just, the joy of having joy that you don't anticipate. Unanticipated joy is like my favorite type of joy.
It's
Houston.
also interesting, though, how when we ask that question, individuals will carry over that childhood memory to where they are today. So, given that you kind of reflected on being recognized and acknowledged, do you still feel some of the excitement or the anticipation or the questioning when you're acknowledged today? Or is it a different feeling today?
It's kinda the same. I feel like to a certain degree of my life, there's always this these periods of where you're working hard, you're doing a lot of things, and then there's some response, whether the response is, one that you hope to get or something that you don't expect to get, I don't know if it's good or bad. It's all relative at this point to me, but at least the feeling that you get from it, the emotional feeling you feel inside, that is what you don't expect. And those are those feelings has carried with me for my entire adulthood, especially since Philadelphia. I've lived in Philadelphia since I was 18 and have been in Philadelphia my entire adult life. I'm 33 now, so it'll be 15 years. It'll be 15 years next year in 2025. Will mark my 15th anniversary in Philadelphia.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a nice segue into this next question. And some people will probably scratch their head at me asking you this, but what was your biggest failure and what did you learn from that experience?
That is a very that is I don't know if I don't know what biggest failure. I mean, I I was reading something about that Beyonce had. They said that Beyonce never really had any flops. She just always had different levels of winning. But I will say one particular thing that I think about is it'll be 10 years from now, 2015, actually around this time. So this was all 10 years ago. I had just graduated from Penn in 2014 and I worked for a startup. And it was someone else's dream. And it did not work out, not because it wasn't a good idea. It's just that the person who had created this idea and this company that I was working under, they just was not fully invested in it as much. And, everything kind of crumbled. And it was heartbreaking because I had put so much intellectual property and ideas and things into it, and for it to just go away like that, I was just really upset. And it was hard because I had gotten a lot of my friends to come out to the grand opening, brought so many people to show up, and brought all these people that I knew and really leveraged my connections. And I think, and it was in that moment that I realized that I was never going to fully work or give all of my assets, talent to someone else's dream, company, or vision. I will consult, but it was that day that I always stick with this quote and I say, I work with companies, but I don't work for them. I work for myself. And that was the groundwork for me to create my own business, for me to begin to be independent and to get in the mindset of working with individuals, working with companies is cool. Working for someone, you put too much power in their hands. And I get that there's different people that have different, financial, social obligations, but I've always been in a space where I tell people create a lane or an opportunity where you have creative control and independence. Some people can do that full time, some people do that part time, but it just makes a difference. Like my husband has companies that he do outside of working for the city. All of my friends have like LLCs and businesses and projects and things that they do outside of whatever work they're doing. And it gives them a creative space and freedom to, feel like whatever vision they have, it's going to be of their doing or undoing of their choice.
Well, when we ask that question, it's always interesting from all the different people that we've talked to how failure, even if it's maybe not truly identified as failure, but that has had this substantial influence as to how they aspire and how they move through life, going forward, and how it really fuels the success of individuals. All right, so this next question is one, actually, when I wrote it, I was curious to hear how you would respond to it because you often are engaged with so many different people, certainly get exposed to a variety of historical interpretations. So, question is, if you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would that be and why?
Mm, dead, it would be Bayard Rustin. Bayard Rustin would be somebody I definitely he's interesting on so many levels, and I think, the movie that came out on Netflix is great. I got exposed to him when I was in college. It was a book called Lost Prophet. It was a
Mhm.
big book that, a mentor at the time, recommended to me and said, "Hey, I think this would speak to you. And this was my first time being exposed to the fact that there was an openly gay man during the civil
Yes.
rights movement that was out and that was doing this work. And it just spoke to me at a time in my life when I was trying to figure myself out, trying to figure out like how can I make an impact despite all of the discrimination and negativity that was in the world then. I mean, this was around 2010, 2011, so it's before marriage equality. It was still okay in certain music and songs to say very defamatory language about queer people. And being someone that was in a city that was not, was not from on the East Coast, on Penn's campus, there was a lot of class, racial, gender disparities and different experiences. And for someone like myself that was getting exposed to all this, I just wanted to know, is there someone else like me in this world that is doing this, has done this, that did it and was successful? Who's the heroes and legends I can look up to? And college gave me an opportunity to see a diversity of leaders. And so he has a very complicated life. He had lived a very,
Mhm.
very, very complicated life. And I would just be interested to just ask him questions about some of the decisions and things he made, good and bad, or things I'm like, what made you be a little conservative on that? But I would just love that. He's just such a very interesting, nuanced person, and that would be someone I would definitely do dinner with and want to meet.
I would have to invite myself to that. Now, my interpretation is that of which I saw in the movie, but
Right.
it also for me was this eye-opening experience because for all of the luminaries that were tied to the civil rights, movement, you know, I'd never really heard the story of Rustin, right? And
Mhm.
as a black male,
Yeah.
honestly, like looking at his character, and to your point, it was just he was so multidimensional.
Yes.
Number one, he was smart as could be, which I was taken by how he could express himself in such an intellectual and passionate way to get a point across and still be true to who he was as a person. I mean, I totally agree with you 100%. That would be someone I would want to be there. Plus, he's a really good partier, at least from what I saw. So
Yeah, like, this is somebody that he would be a good time. Like, there's some people where you're like, "Oh, I feel like we will have to sit down and be, very formal, and then I will bow and leave." This is somebody where we could do that and then still go out for a drink or something, or maybe
absolutely.
while we're there. So, he just seems like an overall interesting figure, for so many reasons. And he
Wow.
would have tea on so many other people. Like, I wanna know some other folks that he hung out with. Like, what's up with them, So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Very good choice. All right, so that's a perfect segue. So, why don't you tell us your LGBTQ story? I'm sure a lot of people think they know it, but why don't you tell us your story?
Yeah, many years ago, I wrote a long form piece for Philadelphia Magazine called Three Outs. And this was very early before I guess I had a lot of visibility. And so some of my most personal life experiences I wrote many, many years ago before I was known to a lot of folks at large in the city and beyond. But this piece I wrote was called Three Outs, and it was about my coming out journey and how I describe it as coming out three times. Coming out to myself, which was very young, really much in tune knowing who I was more so around middle school to high school, and then I came out to my friends and people in my circle when I was in high school. And I went to Elite Fellowship High School. It was a huge high school. I had 1,000 kids in my graduating class. I had 5,000 kids in my high school, period. It was a very huge school, mostly Black and Brown, Latino and Black students mostly. I was the class president and valedictorian. And when I hear stories about people not fitting in high school, not being themselves and being out, what was interesting about my experience is that I was out in high school and ran for class president, did all the things, and I was openly gay in high school. Interesting enough, I wasn't out to my family until I was in college, until my junior year in college. And so it was one of those things where it was an open secret. Where it's so interesting how high school life and college, like the world was so different back then, where you could have a whole different life in high school and be a whole different personality, and you can come home and those things never really intersect unless you was getting in trouble.
Mhm.
And so I was in high school and very much so was who I was. But it never hit my parents. Like no one knew, like no one told my parents outwardly. It was like an understood secret. And I think for me, I didn't come out to my family not because I was scared that they were gonna be homophobic and be rude or whatever. Part of me just did not want them to worry.
Mm,
because we think about the time we were in, there were still lots of outward hate crimes. I think people really forget there has been progress and there's still a lot more work to be done. But the world was so different,
mm.
very much back then. President Obama at the time, he wasn't necessarily in favor of gay marriage up front. He was okay with civil unions. It was still a very, interesting time back then. So I knew I wanted to go to college. I wanted to go to Penn. I wanted to leave. And I think if I would have came out to them, I think they would have been more worried about me and be more protective. And I was like, I don't need you to. I got this. And I did. I did. I was very fortunate that I was not a victim of any hate crimes, anything, like that. But I didn't want them to worry. And so that was my major thing. And so I did come out when I was 21 and they were like, "Oh, yeah, we kind of knew already." Everybody was like kind of cool. It was like, yeah. And I was grown, so I didn't have the awkward conversations I think some parents have with their kids when they're younger like, "Are you sure? Is it a phase?" At 21 it was no phase. No
But you
phase.
had also had previous experience of coming out in
Yeah.
other aspects of your life, so
Yes.
there was a sense of confidence,
Oh,
that
by
you
then,
felt as you
absolutely.
went along. Yeah.
Yeah, I had friends. I mean, there were different levels. Like I at first I was in tune with myself. Like by middle school, early high school, I was like, yeah, I'm gay. And I got comfortable with myself being able to be in a place. And then I started to tell my friends in my circle, some were straight, some were not straight. And everybody was just like, yeah, okay. And it was like everybody was cool. It was a safe space in that regard with friendship. And then certain teachers and mentors in high school, they were supportive and things of that nature. And so it was nice to just for me, I was fortunate enough, and everyone don't have that experience. Some people get outed, some people have other traumatic experiences, and so I'm just very blessed and grateful that my experience was able to have it in this type of process. I guess it was a phase, right? A coming out phase versus a knowing who you are phase, but that I was able to do it in a way on my own terms and do it in a way that was very safe and protective. And so I always have a lot of thoughts about people when I think about people's journey. Everyone's journey is very different. And I think some people might feel like they got announced to the world at the same time. That was not my experience. I felt like I wanted to build up a level of comfort to be able to come to terms with however the outcome is, I can live with that. And so my family was the last to know before everyone else did, which is, interesting.
Well, it's good the way that you shared that because amongst the things that we like to be able to share through the podcast, especially for listeners who are trying to figure things out for themselves, is how did some other people, do this? And someone like yourself, it certainly serves as a great role model for them. But you've talked about your friends and your circle, and that really takes me to my next question. So, just how big is your inner circle?
Bigger than most, but smaller than people might expect. I'm really lean on a combination of my Philly folks, really close friends I've had since college that have known me before I was Ernest Owens.
Mhm,
But know me and know my story and journey, and it's really great to have people that are with you. But then I also have a lot of new friends and people that have known me since. And we have a lot of similarities of experiences where they know what it's like to be ridiculed in the press or be elated or be in situations where you have all these opportunities. Like I'm happy to have people that I've connected with in the industry that have those experiences, along with childhood friends and people that I've grown with in college. And then family is always in the mix as well. Like I just always have friends. But in my world, like my friends are my family,
mhm,
like with relatives and things. Like I have a really strong family that like in my mind, my family are my friends. My close friends are family to me.
mhm.
Like, that's just how I look at them. And then I have a network of just, associates and people in the industry that I support and bounce off of and do things of that nature. And understanding the difference between associates and friends is something that has taken some time for me to learn, but I've definitely mastered since the pandemic. I think the pandemic is when I started to really differentiate the two.
Yeah.
But for a period of time, it was a moment where, I was like, come in, everybody come in, just that was easy going. But I've definitely understood the power of boundaries since the pandemic. But I
Right.
would say that it's been close friends and family. That's my core, and a couple of associates in my network for sure. That's my tribe.
What we certainly find is we engage in this question that as people evolve into their careers and into their life, that inner circle does get, very exclusive, and
Mhm.
that, there is a degree of, confidence is built around those who are in it in terms of how they contribute to your continued success, but that they're also the ones who can probably tell you, you are absolutely crazy. Well, set your course in the right direction. Now, I know I've asked you a question that was really kind of centered upon your biggest failure, but to maybe take a bit of a different turn,
Yeah.
when was the best year of your life and when was the worst year of your life?
So hard. I think for me, I look at things as cycles. And so I've been noticing a pattern for the past 15 years of like 3 years and their consecutiveness throughout 5 year cycles. So 2008, 2009, 2010, 2013, 2014, 2015, 2018, 2019, 2020, and then 2023, 24, 25. In each of those years, I mean, 25, I was still yet to be determined, but my pattern is that in all of the first year intervals that I say, there's always been like the 3 years, it's always been a life changing thing that happens, like something in my life that's uncontrollable that happens.
Mm.
So in eight, it was Obama getting elected. There was a family to passing departure in my family. And then in 2013, my grandmother passed away, which was like everything to me. 2013, between three, I had a situation, 2018, my journalism career took a real twist and turn. Like the covering beat, I was the LGBTQ editor. They killed the LGBTQ channel for Philly Mag, which wasn't a bad thing, but they just changed it. And my whole direction where I was going journalistic wise, that changed. So there was all these types of changes that would happen. And in 2023, an organization I'm a part of had a major split and change that was just drastic and dramatic as hell. So these are those moments. Then I find that the next year is a year of planting seeds, realignment, reshifting, reprioritizing. Okay, this thing happens. How do I build things back? And so I call it the growing season. So in 2019, in 2009, it was my final year. I decided that, I'm going to apply to college. I don't want to stay in Texas. I want to do something different. 2020 and 14, I graduated from Penn, met the love of my life, who's my husband to this day. 2019, I got accepted to a master's program, got a book agent, started to change the way in which I wanted to interact in the industry. This year, made some pivots to expand and broaden my career beyond what people know me for. And then that year is the harvest year, that third year, which is the year where I consider the year where things begin to prop up. 2010, I moved to Philadelphia, went to the University of Pennsylvania, my life forever changed. 2015, completely went out, had a brand new career change, decided to go into journalism full throttle ahead, and also launch my LLC.
Mm.
2020 was the pandemic, wrote my book, started to really, get serious about pivoting my career once more. And in 2025, some
Yeah.
new stuff. So it's been in cycles like that. And I think one would argue the worst is always the eight of my years.
Mm.
And then the 2 years after that is the harvest and rebirth and reshifting. So my life always have gone through those cycles for like 3 cycles already. And so that's just been a pattern I've been noticing. So I don't know if it's worst or best, but I guess you could argue the best years have always been the years by five. So the zeros, the fives. So
Right.
next year's like a best year. But that's just how it's been in them cycles.
Well, so it's interesting as we've asked this question of other people, similarly, that really, horrible year has really planted seeds.
Yeah,
It may take a while for it to begin to, sprout and show, what you have been able to learn from that, gain from that. But it really serves as that impetus for, similar to what you said, the next phase of your life and that next big journey. And it's interesting for you, though, how you are able to kind of see that pattern and
yeah,
understand what the pattern is, because that pattern also gives you the ability to anticipate that there will not always be good days. and and should they come about, they really serve as that ability for me to move forward. So I thank you for that. That's a really good way for us to kind of look at how we rebound from tough times. All right, so let's talk journalism. We know that you know this inside and out. So We have three questions for you. Very interested in understanding from you right now, what are some of the significant trends that you see that are developing in journalism today?
I think more people are trying to do it independently more. Companies are just mainstream media companies are failing journalists. They're failing readers. They're failing society. I would argue. So many people are seeking truth, and they want unfiltered truth. They want uncomfortable truth. They want truth that they can then make independent decisions. And I think journalism has become so much of a business that so much of it has been workshopped and carved out, and we get some things, we don't get everything, and I think people are just at a point where there's a lot of distrust, and I think some of that distrust isn't the fault of journalists per se, but the industries and space they work in, because you got big huge billionaires that own mega newsrooms. Now you got huge investors and publishers that's trying to determine the output and outcome of things, and they're looking for handouts for themselves, and their hands are getting too dirty. And so I'm noticing the trend is that more people are going independent. More people are going to produce their own content. More people are going out doing citizen journalism. And there are faults here too. Like, I'm not saying this is the best, but it's just the trend that more people are going to go to independent outlets and sources for their information rather than relying on, a news source or outlet per se. I've been ahead of this curve for a long time. I have built a following of people that they read my articles at different places, but they also follow me and follow my accounts and follow my podcast and follow my content. And I provide a lot of unfiltered truth and reality information to the public in ways that some news editors and people don't want me to say because it doesn't fit their agenda or outlet, but I have a place to put that information when it isn't fit for print. And there's ways that people are getting that information and being empowered, but you got to build credibility. You got to build longevity. And I've been in the game for over a decade and have built, a consistency of knowing what I know and being able to explain things in a way and predict things in a way that makes people continue to follow me and look for more.
Through the your career, the evolution of news and access to it has changed. Do you find that trending is even changing now? That it's either faster, slower, than perhaps it was 10 years ago, either because of how people have become accustomed to consume news that they tend to follow a trend even faster now than they would have before, or they still pretty much follow that same pattern when it comes to it?
I would say yes and no. I would say yes in the sense that news is more out there faster, like for people who have money, people who have, working Wi-Fi. I think sometimes we underestimate that there is digital divides in this country and in this city, that there is droughts. People don't have access to Wi-Fi as much as we assume they do. A lot of people don't have access to credible sources or any outlets and things. And so there's a huge digital divide that is underestimated in our society. I think people really don't. When people say things like Google's around, I have said that to people who post misinformation. But when we tell people all the time, Google's available, Google's free, we all got Google. A lot of people are not having access to information or to the internet at all. So in some sense, while it is faster to find it once you have it, if you don't have it, you don't have it.
Don't have it.
And that brings me to my no part that there is still a lot of barriers to entry to get information. More news outlets are putting up paywalls. So credible information is harder to get now because there's a paywall. And
Mhm,
I get it, journalists need to get paid. I get it.
mhm,
But like there are paywalls to get factual information.
mhm.
And so when we tell people to look at these credible sources, there are people who can't afford to to look at credible sources. So if they're on Instagram and LinkedIn and places like, well, LinkedIn's fine, I guess, sometimes. But if you're on Instagram or TikTok and some of these places, social media is now pushing out news that's free, but the free has a cost. And the cost is you roll the dice of not knowing if something's true or not.
Right.
So this is a yes and no. We're faster at putting it out there, but we've been slower to make it accessible for all.
No problem. Wow. Great insight.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the common misconceptions that you see in journalism that perhaps you'd like to clear up?
Oh, yes. I think the important thing that people understand is that journalists are not social workers. We're not therapists. We're not counselors. We're not the police. We're not a lot of those things. And there's a lot of times where people will come to us, and I'll talk for myself for the work that I do. And while it's important that, yes, there are some things that I can report and spread, there's a lot of stuff that is very salacious or very criminal that requires some other help that I don't necessarily know journalism is going to be able to resolve or fix. And so there have been times where I've been given information that is very heavy, very serious. And sometimes I ask the question, I understand that you want to spread awareness, but knowing society the way I know society at this point, and as someone who's been a professor, I'm a professor, I teach journalism. And as I've gotten older in the field, I've begun to realize that not every story or every situation deserves media attention. Some of these situations can be mediated between individual parties. Some situations should just be reported to the police or reported to, the authorities or be dealt with by professionals. Some stuff needs to be dealt with at a therapy session with a licensed trauma professional. Some stuff I just don't necessarily know or believe should be the first person. Like if I some experiences I've had in my life, I never thought to myself, I need to go to a reporter. I was always looking at other resources. And so maybe I think what has happened in society is that we have not done enough awareness around various resources to help people. So much that people feel like the only outlets is either the police, which is not always the answer, let me be very clear, but or the media. And there's other mediations and other ways that we can express grievances and concerns that would probably better serve us in our communities rather than going to either the police immediately or going to the media. Because in certain cases, you can go to the police and the reaction from the police might not be the desired outcome. And we've seen that.
Mhm.
But also going to the media may not be the desired outcome, where you done said some things and it opens a Pandora's box and then it creates unintended consequences that you wasn't expecting or situations that were not intended. And
Mhm.
so for me, it's people misunderstanding what my role is and what we are supposed to do and putting and projecting other jobs and responsibilities on me that is not my job description and what I'm supposed to do. I think that has been, if I could summarize it, that has been the biggest misinterpretation. And a lot of people do it. I don't care what degree you have, education, this is everybody. I can't tell you how many people come to me and say, I got a story for you. And I'm like, what's your story? Oh, this person, da da da. Okay. Okay, you don't like that person. It might be true, but is that news? Like, what are you trying to do here? Are you trying to embarrass somebody? You think that I'm, love Wendy Williams, but I'm not Wendy Williams. I'm not page six. Respect my work. I'm a journalist. And I'm here to report news that's gonna matter to the masses, it's gonna make impact. I don't need to know all of your salacious personal riffs. That's a waste of time. That's a waste of my time. That's a waste of the people's time. How is this gonna make impact? Or how is this gonna really speak to accountability?
Mhm.
And so many people have come to me with things that are so irrelevant that's like, okay, go to your HR manager or go just sit down and talk to the person. And if you can't do that, find other ways and means or just leave. If you don't like the job anymore or you just don't like the person and there's nothing that is criminal here, there's other ways to address these issues. And I sometimes feel like people project a lot of these things onto us.
Well, as I was writing questions, I felt so strong that you would be able to give us some very good insight, and you were able to do that. So I truly appreciate that. Thank you so much. And it does really, I think, apply to how we maintain credibility for journalists and how they report various stories and news. All right, so moving to maybe a little bit lighter, and I think perhaps you'd be one of the best to share some insights on this particular area. How has, innovation and technology really impacted journalism, And are there any particular breakthroughs that you really think are exciting? I mean, we know that there's a lot of integration of artificial intelligence today, but is there any particular innovation that you think is a true breakthrough that has really made a big difference, or is very exciting?
So I'm not crazy about AI personally, so that I will not be saying AI. I mean, I and people benefit from it in different ways. I think the verdict is still the verdict is still out on whether AI, how if it's benefit. I have seen more cons than pros. But for me, as far as innovation, I think it's a more about systems. And this is something that I've known for a long time, but I think workplaces are changing. The workplace structure of remote work is a breakthrough in journalism. I know that sounds really weird, but it is so important. As a professional independent journalist, I most of the contracts I have are remote. I've not worked in a newsroom my entire career. I've never worked in a newsroom my entire career. I've been a journalist for over a decade, and I have never worked in a newsroom, a physical newsroom. I've never clocked in. Some of those great stories I've written, some of the incredible radio I've done, TV production stuff I've done, on air stuff. Most of the stuff has been done remote. I've done it, in my house. I've done it in my personal office. I make appearances on Pierce Morgan regularly from the UK. People are like, "Are you in a studio?" I'm in a studio van. Like, I'm in a van with a cool studio background. People think I'm somewhere in a big old fancy studio. No, that's a van that pulled up outside of my house that I went into with snacks and water, and it's being done like you think I'm in some major studio. I'm actually in a van that's really high tech. So I think remote working has been a new innovation in journalism. People have assumed that the only way you could do stories if you're in a newsroom with other reporters and, back in the day. No, no. And I think the pandemic realized how productive people could be if they actually was working from home. Look, I've told people you're never gonna hear an HR problem from me because I'm working for myself. I
Right.
tell myself, "You being bad today. You need to stop watching TV." Or sometimes when my husband works home, he'll be like my HR manager, "Mr. Owens, aren't you supposed to be fine?" Like today, he was like, "You got your thing. You need to get ready for that. You on the phone." I'm like, "All right." But outside of that, I'm at home. And so I think remote working in journalism is something that's gonna stay. I think a lot of people wanna force the in-person. You can, but the best stories can happen. And I've gotten some of the best stories, and I've beat some of the competition because while they were somewhere in a room, in a newsroom, arguing and debating about topics, I was out there in the streets with the people with a cell phone. So I think remote in the industry is to me, the real innovation has come. And I think will make stories better. I think we'll have more relationships in the community and we'll be better serving in the public. So I would say remote.
Awesome. Well, you've given us some really great insight around journalism. I really appreciate that. I know for a lot of our listeners, they want to hear more about Ernest Owens, which I certainly want to do. And just to be mindful of where we are in our time, I also want to get to our uh, regular something to say question. But I wanted to dig a little bit deeper with you because recently it was announced that you're taking on some new opportunities after you recently left as editor of Philly Eat. So, what's next?
Yes, so I was the editor at Eater Philly for over a year, and it was great doing food writing. There was some restructuring in the company, and I've decided to take a buyout, which was awesome because normally, as a person who does the work that I do in freelance independent, you just kind of just leave. But to leave with a buyout and a nice one, and then walk into a new opportunity was just a blessing, especially in this day and age where there's a lot of different media restructurings, layoffs, and all those things happening, and people are out of the count for a while before they figure out what's next. For me, I was fortunate enough because I was seeing the signs, as someone who's been in the industry for a while, I noticed trends. And so I was already preparing my exit strategy before I was given the boot, which was a blessing. So I have a new role and I'm now the diversity visiting lecturer fellow for Community College of Philadelphia. I've been an adjunct there for a previous semester, but in this role, I'm able to continue teaching, which I love doing. But now I'm able to really expand my impact to really improve and make some really great recommendations to the English department and writing department, but create some really great programming and partnerships with some community players I'm involved with, like the Philadelphia Association of Black Journalists and other entities that I'm a part of as well. So I'm really excited that I'm able to continue writing for places like Philadelphia Magazine. I'm gonna still do politics. I still have a radio show with WRD Radio. I do a show called City Council Live, where I'm at City Council every Thursday at their sessions, those long sessions, and I'm like giving people, on the air, beat by beat reporting. So I love doing my reporting. I love doing my journalism and politics and work. Still gonna do some food stuff because I still love restaurants and food. I'm never gonna stop loving to eat. But now I'm in a place where I can make an impact with the future and do it in a community way where I'm changing curriculum and really shaping the industry and the future of journalism with students. And that's something I've always wanted to do. And to have an opportunity like this at this time, especially where we're at now, was just perfect.
Wow. And I think that community college environment is a perfect one to do the kind of work that you do because for so many of those students, they really do represent, the working people of the city.
Hmm.
And for many, it's that bridge that may take them to, their next full 4-year college that will
That's
allow
right.
them to embark upon their university. So to get that kind of insight at a community college is fantastic. So thank you for
Yeah.
doing that. So you are entering your third term as president of the Philadelphia Association of Black Journalists. So what's in store for the organization now that it's recently turned, what, 50 years old?
Yes, we just turned 50 this year. 50 years as the first. We are the first Black Journalism Association of its kind in America. We predate the National Association of Black Journalists. We predate actually any other journalist group of color. We were before the Hispanic Journalists Association, we're before the Asian Journalists Association. We are the first of its kind. And we are in a very great time at PABJ. We have some brand new leaders on our board. We have some really great partnerships and relationships with, coming with CCP. We're going to do some great stuff in collaborations there, of course. CBS3, shout out to Kelly Frank, who's the general manager. She's been a big supporter of what we do. We have great relationships with Philadelphia Community Access Media. I used to be their board chairman many years ago, but Philly Cam. And we're doing a lot of work where we're going to expand impact. There's going to be some great new programming that we've never done before that is going to hit the ground running. And it's almost if I can't name and say now, but one thing I will say is you're gonna see more of us in the community. You're gonna see more cross-generational programming, and you're gonna see some major partnerships that we haven't really unleashed until next year. So it's gonna be a really great term. I'm super excited. I'm very grateful for my membership and people for supporting me in my leadership. And it's just been a blessing to be representing Black journalists, especially during this time and age in our industry.
Absolutely. I think back on my days at the Convention and Visitors Bureau, it was one of the crown jewel groups that we wanted to bring to Philadelphia to hold their annual conference and their regional meetings. So
Yeah.
if we can put a plug in that through you, just to remind you.
We're gonna talk soon. We got something coming up here, PABJ, around conventions and conferences.
So your debut book, The Case for Cancel Culture, it'll be celebrating its second year anniversary in February. And kudos
Yes.
because I've seen a lot of the great platforms that you've been able to promote the book. But will there be a second book?
Yes, there is. What I will say is that I have finally nailed down the topic. The proposal is done. I have to wait for the election results to play out because my book it will be stuff culture and politics, and the election will play a strong role and theme in the book. And I wanted to wait for those results. I've been working on the proposal all of 2024. But when Biden dropped out and Vice President Harris came in, that took a loop, and we just had to put everything on pause. We say, "Wait, we gotta see how this play out, because I don't know, we're in uncharted territory."
Right.
And so that changed that everything had to be put on hiatus, and then once the election results happened, I needed a week to recuperate because it was just a long, daunting election. I came back, said, "Okay," talked to my agent, was like, "Okay, I'm ready." I got an idea about how we can rework it. And so I've spent the past month and some change reworking the proposal, getting all that together, and then we're going to start the process of getting everything ready next year, starting in January. So book two is on the way. I call it B2. B2 is on the way. But Case for Council Culture is still doing its thing. We still rocking and rolling. I just did a huge tour with the book, and it's available where all books are sold. If you're on Amazon, you're looking to buy a book for a family member. I also narrate the book. There's an audiobook for people. It's
Oh,
on
wow.
Audible. So if you are an audiobook listener and you love the way I sound on this show, and you want to hear me read to you for over 6 hours, you can do that as well. But the audiobook is out. The book is available where books are sold. It's everywhere. So yeah, I really loved writing that book. The book really has carried legs. We're about to be 2 years in, and it has not. I mean, I was just on Dr. Phil in September talking about the book, and for an author, for a first-time author, for me to do have a book that carried legs like that for that as long as it has, is just a blessing. So I'm looking forward to bringing some of that momentum into book two and more to come.
Wow. Well, congrats to you. And I know the first book certainly influenced a lot of leaders as they were able to kind of lean deeper into that subject
That's
and
right.
help them to get a deeper understanding of what that phenomena is and how to kind of manage that
Mhm.
within their organization. And I think to your point, with a follow up, given the changing dynamics of our society, it'll help many who were able to walk away with an understanding of your first book to kind of apply some new and probably some necessary, strategies as they go forward. But listen,
Absolutely.
we know that it isn't all about work. We also
That's right.
know, well, you've been married now for 3 years to your husband, Barry. And soon you'll be celebrating, what, 11 years together
That's
on
right.
Valentine's Day. But in your opinion, what keeps your relationship so strong after a decade? And let me just depart here for a minute and maybe just take a little bit of a personal, deep dive in it because a big personality in a couple is a big thing, right?
Mhm.
And if we take that big personality out, at the end of the day, the person who you're with, you commit your life to, at the end of the day, that's what makes you who you are.
Right.
And, I would just want to know from someone like you, for those who see you from the external, because we know your inner circle are very clear of your connection and your relationship with your husband. But, for those who are, 50 miles away and they're looking at it, like, what keeps your relationship so strong?
That's a very good question. I think for me specifically is I think it's about recognizing how you can best support, the person you're with and what they're doing and vice versa. That we are very open, we're very transparent about our dreams, our goals, and we love each other and that's great. Looks and all that. He's fine, I'm fine, we look good. But beyond romance, about just the mere like ability to consider someone and be resourceful to someone else and just know and trust that that person is doing the same for you. And so throughout his career, we both met in college, and which is a theme. Like I'm just so happy that I met someone that knew me before all of the attention. And same with him. Like we both were very clear about our dreams. And so everything that I am doing now, I told him that 11 years ago. He knew in 2013 when we first met. We got together the eve of Valentine's Day in 2014, but he knew very much what I wanted to be and who I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. And he had an idea and sense of what his interest in it was as well. And it's always just been a journey of throughout our different phases of careers and interests, how we can support each other and show up for each other in those times. When something doesn't work out, when something do work out, we always have been able to bounce off our energies. Because interesting enough, like in situations where I was having moments where I was like in that rut of like, oh, where I'm gonna do next. He was zooming.
Mm,
And there were times where he was figuring out where he wanted to pivot and things for me was popping. And in each of these situations, we've been able to support each other, connect each other, be a resource and be there for each other through all of those experiences and times. And I think a lot of times in relationships, when I hear people who have not been in relationships, they often come into situations where they feel like they have to be all the way together. Like I gotta have all my stuff together. I gotta be complete. And I feel like if that's boring, if you come into a relationship where everything is together and you're fully there and you're fully complete, you don't allow there to be a open opportunity for someone to come in your life and provide and fulfill things that you don't know. Where's the support? And so we came into situations where we had our stuff together for the most part, but there was opportunities and things that I couldn't have done by myself
mm,
and
mm.
wouldn't want to do by myself. that was great to be able to have someone, a companion, and be with someone that you love that can be able to support you and nurture and do all those things as well. And so I always tell people to enter a relationship, not coming into a relationship feeling like there's nothing anyone can do for you. Because if you do, then what's the point?
Right.
What's the point of it? So I was at a point when I got in my relationship and where I was like, yeah, I'm steady and stable, but I want to flourish and thrive. And being with him took me from a position of being stable to thriving. And that is what makes us work and has continued to make us work. And what I love the most about our relationship is that it's always been the consistency, the reliability, the dependability, and the love throughout all of it.
Wow. Well, very well said. And speaking on behalf of my husband Tom and I, we've been together now for 33 years. So I will
Oh.
tell you, yeah, 33 years. And
I'm
so
33 years old, about as long as I've been alive.
I will tell you that, a lot of the elements that you described, and I think it's really important, I think, as we speak to the LGBTQ community, you know,
Yeah.
what are really the substantial drivers of what allows for us to have successful relationships. So congratulations to you. But listen, we're at our last few minutes of the podcast, and I want to ask you probably the most important question. So, because we are called Something to Say, we always like to end our podcast asking those who are being interviewed. So, what do you have to say?
Well, what do I have to say? My advice to people in general is stop being self-deprecating. Stop beating yourself up. It's enough people in the world that will beat you up on the internet or beat you up at your job, at work, or wherever you're doing. Don't be an assistant to that. Give yourself some grace. Give yourself some grace. Give yourself some patience. I think over the past year, I've told so many people, colleagues, friends, people I know, I've noticed a pattern, and it's never something I've done. Like, I'm not like, I just can't. I mean, listen, I live in a world where enough people got opinions about me in the world that I don't need to have an opinion about myself that's negative, to be honest. I love myself. I do. And someone's got to do it outside of friends and family. Like, I love who I am. And there are people in the world who will want me to hate who I am for various reasons, for being Black, for being queer, for being outspoken, for having nice nails. A lot of people in the world will want you to hate yourself. I don't need to partake in that. And so I think for other people who are not as visible, don't have it, they can be in their mind all the time, critiquing their body, critiquing how much money they make and where they need to be in life. And sometimes it's like you have to recognize that you are going to be with yourself until you die. And you need to be in a space where you need to be at peace. And so I encourage people to be at peace with yourself, to give yourself grace, to forgive yourself, to work it out. If there are things that you don't like, come to the mindset of what can I do to work on that if I feel like it needs work. But just don't sit and reside in self misery and make it a thing. Yeah, so self-deprecation, don't make that a personality trait. There are some people that literally it's their personality trait to talk down to themselves and loathe themselves. And it's hard to hear, it's hard to watch. And a lot of times the things that they're being critical about themselves, they think they're the only one struggling. And a lot of people are having similar experiences
Hmm.
and they'll realize, oh snap, you're going through that too? Yeah. So give yourself that grace. Give yourself that. Don't feel like you're the only person and don't be hard on yourself as much. That's what I want to say.
Well, thank you for that. And I think that's such a meaningful message, especially as we kind of end the year and start a new year. And Ernest, I just want to say thank you for sharing your time, the passion, the insights that you've given us. And quite honestly, the words that you provided are really not only informative, but I think very motivational for many who are in our audience today. So it has been a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
So that's a wrap for this episode of Something to Say. Stay tuned for more inspiring conversations with the voices of individuals from diverse backgrounds sharing their passions. So until next time, this is Greg DeShields.
Thank you for tuning in to Something to Say. We trust you found some valuable insights and takeaways that can help you find your passion. Don't miss out on future episodes. Please subscribe, rate, and review us on your preferred platform. We value your feedback and suggestions, so let us know how we can serve you better. Keep the conversation going and stay inspired until we meet again. Take care and happy listening.